after our last meeting in June about the volunteer for the wrestling program. Many of you know that I come from St. Louis, where it's very, very important that volunteers, athletic-wise, play-wise, everything else has to go through a Virtus training. Has to go with that Virtus training is background checks to make sure that we are not putting our children in danger and not doing that. When I read the article on this Landmark regarding this issue about the volunteer being found not guilty, but the background on it, what he was supposed to be, was he a coach, was he not a coach, I was confused, and a lot of people in the community came up to me and said they were confused and said, what was on this? Especially people like in St. Louis, where that's a big thing. There are people that can't coach or can't do anything until they get this Virtus background check going on. But that article itself gave me a lot of confusion, a lot of, is it not? And with that, I think that in order to help transparency, in order to be able to show that we are responding to, addressing issues or items that are coming up here, I think that we should look at it and the board itself conduct an independent investigation, and it's fact-finding. It's not going to be pointing fingers and try to fire people, but to me it should be fact-finding. And from those facts and information given from this investigation, then we can go back and turn it back to the policy committee, and the policy committee then can see what any revisions need to be made on the policy regarding volunteers so that we are up to date and we avoid issues from that. Because I think the key thing going forward is when an issue comes up, it should be resolved, and from that resolution, then the issue is no more. I think that because of this, I think that the scope of people talking in the article and everything else, that the fact-finding investigation should be independent. And it should be those people who were not on the board and administrators who were not in that during that time period. You, Dr. Bennett, would be one of them. The 3 new board members could be on there because they were not a part of the board at that time and involved with the high school on it. So with that, I think that, and I'm going to make a motion on this, that the Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, Cook County, Illinois, conduct a fact-finding investigation for the issue of the volunteer wrestling coach to provide information that will help the board review the policy for volunteers at RB. The investigative panel should consist of board members and administration who were not in place during that period. The investigative report should be presented in the October board meeting.
I would go second.
And Mayor, I'll give you a copy of it.
Any discussion?
I have no problem with trying to find out the process of moving forward, but negating or leaving out board members that were there at the time who possibly didn't know anything about it, why you want to divide them out, I don't know. Or how, or who would determine who's going to be the investigative group. I think the biggest issue is moving forward and what do we want to do with the volunteers and how do we want to treat volunteers and work on the policy. This man as obviously was indicted and he was exonerated. So are we looking into people out there as well who have blemishes and other things that, how far are we going and what type of volunteers are we talking about? And I think I'd like this conversation on a policy level as well to determine, you're basically getting to the point of background checks and our volunteers and our connectivity of our children with people out in the community who are not necessarily fingerprinted school employees within the district. And I'm up for that conversation. I don't know if I necessarily, as a board member, need this investigative group to find out who, what, where, of what happened.
But in order for you to find out where the shortfalls were in that policy and what needs to be updated in that policy, you need to look back at the issue. And by looking back at that issue, you then are able to identify where the weak points are, where the trouble points are. And from those trouble points, and that's why it's a fact-finding thing. And from those trouble points, you got to
give us the fact that the man was indicted.
What?
A background check wasn't going to give us the fact that there was an issue with some sort of indicted process within the individual. Okay, and once the man was convicted, is that wrong?
That's wrong.
Okay, well then I'm misinformed.
Yeah.
Well, the object now is not to conduct that investigation, please.
Thank you.
You know, if the board's going to investigate, the whole board investigates something. It doesn't, I don't believe a portion of the board would investigate that.
Then we can do, we can amend it to have the whole board do it and do a fact-finding, you know.
And Matt, I think, I don't have a problem with that. We don't want to make mistakes again. We want to find out how it happened and how we need to fix it, whether it's through policy, through administrative procedure. I think Dr. Bennett is our person that we don't need to have the board do the investigation. That is what we have a superintendent for. I think that we can, as a board, or as Jim as the president, direct the superintendent to get this information for us, to look into it, to see what we need to change, what we need to discuss, and to bring back to the policy committee. I don't think that we need to have a motion and have an investigation. I think, I agree with finding out what went wrong and not having it happen again, but I think that we can direct the superintendent as a first step to start this process for us.
I agree, but this is an administrative
That would be,
procedure, not a-
I would recommend that, Matt, that the board direct me to do that investigation. And I would also agree that I believe the policy on volunteerism in this district should be reviewed in light of any findings that would come forth with regard to that incident. They would hopefully also advise us on the construction of changes in the policy.
I still think more minds are better to do that, and I've done it before in the village, and I've done it before at St. Louis, and I just think that you have a lot on your plate right now, and I think that more minds delving into this, and we're going to be able to come up with something.
Well, if, as an alternative to this, if the board wanted to have a member assist the superintendent in so doing, then I would suggest that they appoint you to work with me as an individual on this.
Okay.
I think we
if this guy was innocent, if you're going back and looking into his background, you better be careful. You open up all the bag of worms.
Marty,
Well, they were just
sorry
opening
for this,
up over
but
here, so-
we're not in visitor statements at this point.
You already allowed.
I understand, Marty, we're not in visitor statements at this point. We have a motion before the board to create a fact-finding investigation on the volunteer issue. Seconded.
Give me the wording on that.
Any further, can you restate the motion?
Well, it could be, it consists of a board member and an administrator. I can take out the, we're not in place during that period. I can do that. This is going to be David.
We can just,
Can amend
You can
the
just
motion,
direct
you can amend the motion.
superintendent to do that, and
All
we
right,
don't need to.
I can do that. I can change it to that.
I agree. I don't think we need board action to direct the superintendent to do such a thing.
I agree.
I don't find it particularly useful myself to put a board member in the middle of that situation either. This is an administrative, procedural investigation. I think this board is perfectly capable of making the necessary policy changes to remedy the situation. And I think we're well on our way towards having an administrative team that's able to formulate procedures to carry out that policy to our satisfaction and to ensure our compliance with the law.
My concern going forward is we have people volunteer and we have students to protect. And we have to make that clear line as to who's going to have contact with our students.